Well, when Pastor said he was going to be doing a series on faith and finances, I started thinking about that it would probably be good to get some stories from people about giving and testimonies of God's goodness. And then I started thinking about just Brittany and our life, and just recently that I've been really blessed with a really cool side project contract that, when I think about it, was really supernaturally given to us by God, and it's just been like such a huge blessing. So this guy that's a member of a Cree Nation community about 9 hours north of Cornwall was in town for a week at a course at NAV Canada, and somehow found Harvest online and somehow found me on Facebook Messenger and messaged me and asked me about doing a quote for designing a website for their church. And it was like kind of totally out of left field. I had never met him. I didn't even know how he knew that I may do web development. So it was kind of crazy. And then he wanted to meet up in Cornwall. And I went to Tim's where we were going to meet up, and I called him, and he had forgotten about it. And then he headed back. And so there was all these kind of things that it was like, okay, this is probably not really going to happen. I was kind of skeptical that the contract was going to work out, but anyways, I guess long story short, we ended up coming up with a contract, and I've flown up there twice now to work with them on their church website, and it's been just a huge blessing. And just like thinking back and even telling other people and telling the story now, I'm realizing how supernatural it is that like this random guy that lives nowhere near us would find me, and somehow that we would get connected and have this contract that's been such a huge blessing. You know, God is really faithful, and he's really trustworthy, and he's good. And when we're faithful to live by the principles of giving that Pastor Roy's talking about and that he's going to talk about today, for Britt and I, we've realized that God has always been faithful to provide what we need.
Both Ryan and I were super blessed to grow up in a family that tithed. So we both saw our parents tithing, and something was passed down to both of us. I remember, I remember seeing my parents tithe, and I vaguely remember them like talking about it and kind of teaching me. But I specifically remember making $12 and tithing $1.25, and back then $12 was like a lot, and giving $1.25 of that was huge. But I think even as a child, that did something in my heart and in my spirit, and I think it comes from just seeing my parents tithe. And so we tithed as single people, and since we've been married, we've always tithed. And we share this because when it comes to tithing, sometimes I think you hear stories that are a bit weird, like, you know, someone starts tithing and then they find $1,000 under their pillow or something, and like that has never happened for us or anything like that. But through our lives and consistently tithing, what we've seen is just God's faithfulness over and over and over again. And he has always supplied all of our needs above and beyond, and provided for us in ways like the story that Rye just told, just provided for us in ways that you're like, you can't script that. God totally just has blessed us. So we say all of this, and we're excited to talk about this because we both were blessed to grow up in families that tithed and that taught us how to tithe. And if you are a first generation family who's just starting to tithe, it's super hard. We acknowledge that, and it's a habit that has to be worked into us. But we really believe that your kids will live in the fruit of your decision.
So I don't know where you're maybe at with giving or tithing, and maybe you're skeptical listening to this series. And I guess what I would just say is, you know, we don't, like Pastor Roy said, we don't ever want anyone to feel pressure from us to give. But I want to ask you to open your hearts just to hear from the Holy Spirit what he might be asking you to consider. And like we've said before, we're not saying Harvest needs your money, and we're not saying you have to give it here, but we're saying there's a principle in the Bible of generosity and of giving away from what God has given us. So whether you give it here or somewhere else, whatever the Holy Spirit puts on your heart, I just want you to be open throughout the series, because we have seen the blessing of it and we've seen the result of it. And I wouldn't want any of you to miss out.